Okay. You Were Never Born is the name of the book. You are not a limited, defective person, self, or entity. This false belief is at the root of all seeking, suffering, doubts, and problems in life. Those experiences are only creations of conceptual thought. Those concepts hinge on the imagined person who is assumed to be separate from oneness, from awareness. So all thoughts of a suffering nature concern the identity, attributes, and condition of a person to whom they are assumed to apply. Interest in the thoughts is sustained by the belief that we are that limited person or separate self. The person to whom those thoughts and stories pertain is the central I thought, ego, or person that we have assumed to be present and real. So, are you all with me at this point? Yeah? Okay. This is the linchpin of the whole production. All the self-centered concepts, beliefs, and habits of mind are sustained by the belief in the presence of this person. That is why a very effective approach is simply to investigate the reality of this assumed person. Where is the person? Is it real? Did you ever find it? For example, in any given moment, there may be a few thoughts, feelings, or sensations appearing. Do any of those constitute a person, a separate self? They are simply momentary objects appearing and disappearing in present awareness. How could they be a substantial self or independent person? If you set aside and continue to investigate, you will find that there is nothing else present at all to investigate. All there is wide open, clear, obvious presence, awareness itself. And that is not a limited person or entity. The conclusion must be that the person that we have taken ourselves to be is a complete myth, because it is not findable in direct experience. And if it doesn't exist now, then it can never exist. It has never existed in the past, nor will it exist in the future. If the person is discovered as not real, not present, a mere unexamined assumption, then the root of all self-centered conceptual thoughts, beliefs, habits, and attachments is severed. With this recognition, the interest in the self-centered stories fades naturally and effortlessly, because there is no more belief in the reality of the central concept, the person. The thoughts and beliefs unwind and scatter like autumn leaves in the wind. There is no more belief in the fixed reference point of a self or central character. You simply remain as the open sky of awareness in which all thoughts arise and set, untouched, spacious, clear, and always unmodified. The tendency to fixate on or attach to thoughts dissipates. Seeing this, you cannot believe in self-centered thoughts, even if you want to, because the basic misconception has been undermined. You do not seek water in a mirage once it's known to be a mirage. What about the nature of the world, the universe that presents itself to us? All that we can know is what appears to us in immediate experience. And that which appears, whether it is a thought, a feeling, perception, or any other experience, has no separate and independent existence apart from the awareness which cognizes it. Did you want to say something?
Well, I think, this is certainly the beauty of Wheeler's approach. I mean, he's hitting you right between the eyes and asking you to look inside your direct experience to see if you can find a personal me, which most of us allow to rule our lives. The personal identity with memory and thought and sensation. And he's saying, go look and tell me whether you find that inside yourself.
Well, a personal me that's independent of thoughts, beliefs, opinions, conclusions. Is there a me that's independent of that? Or is the me simply an accumulation of that?
Another way to say it is, if there is no movement of thought, where is the me?
Right.
When you sit quietly and there are no thoughts moving, is there a me independent of thoughts sitting there? Or are you just in a natural state of awareness, alert, open, spacious, like he says? So there's no movement of thought. There's an open, spacious awareness. And he's saying, is there another thing, a me sitting there alongside that awareness? He's challenging us to find that if it's there.
Well, and also what he's doing is he's pointing to that awareness, which is the background in which all these thoughts and beliefs, conclusions and opinions appear. That background of awareness is what we fundamentally are. Right? It's that which we are, not this accumulation of memory, which takes the forms of thoughts and images and beliefs. So now, is that something that we can see for ourselves? Because it's certainly counterintuitive. We think we are our thoughts, right? But he's saying, how can we be our thoughts if there is an awareness of those thoughts? You cannot be that which you can see. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see it. Right?
Yeah, this is Frank. I'd like to say something if I could.
Sure.
This, by the way, I'm Frank. I'm new to the group. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. I think, to me, thinking as an individual kind of was born from when I was in school and I was taught to think for myself. They used to say that. They used to say, think for yourself. And it sort of reinforced the differences that were established in my childhood, you know, when I was before school, as something different than my parents, something different from my friends. And I think, to me, the whole thing is very socialized. And that's where, I know that's where most of it comes from for me. And I guess that's probably something that is widely believed in most cultures. So I think it's based on a system.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly part of our conditioning in the culture.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
We're socialized
Yes.
in this way to believe that we are this separate, independent me.
Right.
Right. Right. And we know that that's the fundamental cause of our suffering. This feeling of separateness. Not only separate from awareness, which we fundamentally are, but separate from each other. Right? And the feeling of being separate from each other fundamentally is what creates a lot of insecurity. There's a feeling of aloneness, of loneliness, of isolation in some deep part of ourselves. And then it becomes you against me, us against them.
I heard something recently, and I won't say from where, because it was from a TV show, but the quote was, war and peace come only from men's minds.
Mm.
And it resonated with me.
Yeah.
Connected to non-duality. It's, it all comes from the me and the I and the you, and you are different than the I, and it's all about me versus you.
Correct. Correct. Well, yeah.
That's the prevailing level of consciousness that we're all are living in. We're all swimming in a communal soup of consciousness that's pitched at a very survival level. Me, my, and mine. My self-interest against your self-interest.
Mm.
Right? And that's why there are people starving in the world, children starving by the tens of thousands, not because we don't have the technology to feed everybody, but because it's not in somebody's political or economic interest to do so.
Yeah.
So that's the burden that we're all kind of swimming in, and the clearer we can be about our true nature, hopefully enables us to swim through that with some greater grace and ease of being.
Yes.
And to not reinforce it, so to speak.
I just want to share a paragraph from Wheeler. Everything that we ever know or experience appears within presence awareness. You have never had a single thought, feeling, sensation, or any other experience outside of awareness. In other words, this presence awareness is the necessary precondition for anything else to be. Without this conscious presence, nothing else is. because objects of experience and the presence of awareness are never known independently of each other. They must be, in essence, the same undivided substance or principle. Just as waves are nothing but water, or gold ornaments are nothing but gold, so are all appearances nothing but that one undeniable being awareness. All that appears, including the seeker himself, is only that. I'm going to read it again. Everything that we ever know or experience appears within presence awareness. Now, is that true or not?
Yeah.
For your own experience, right? I mean, it's
If
your
I
own.
didn't experience it, I'm not aware of it.
You can't be aware of it if you, that you can only experience what you're aware of. You have never had a single thought, feeling, sensation, or any other experience outside of awareness. How can you know you're feeling outside unless you're aware of it? How can you know your thoughts unless there's awareness of it? Right? I mean, this seems,
Hold on.
this is like obvious.
Yeah. Without awareness, I'm dead. Without awareness, I'm dead. So what am I going to experience as an inert mass of body, bone, sinew, and tissue? Nothing.
Okay, right.
So you can say without awareness, you are not.
That's right.
Okay.
You are never not aware. So awareness is your fundamental nature. And so there has been a misidentification here. We've identified with this separate me, which is fundamentally made up of thoughts, memories, feelings, experiences, right? That's our identity. That's who we take ourselves to be. And we're so wrapped up in that and so caught up in that we don't pay attention to our fundamental nature, which is awareness. In other words, this presence, which means being, right? Presence is being. Look, you know you exist, right? No one has to tell you you exist. I can say to you, do you exist? What are you going to say? Of course, yes. That's presence. Presence awareness is the necessary precondition for anything else to be. Without this conscious presence, nothing else is. Because objects of experience, whatever that may be, you know, what are the objects of experience? Relationships, thoughts, feeling, right?
Yeah.
Objects of experience. Because objects of experience and the presence of awareness are never known independently of each other. They're never known independently of each other. They must, in essence, be the same undivided substance or principle. Just as waves are nothing but water. So, I mean, you go to the ocean and there's loads of waves. Sometimes it's less wave, there's more wave. But the fundamental substance of each wave is water, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just as a gold ornament is nothing but gold. So I can have gold earrings, a gold necklace, a gold bracelet, melt them down, and they're all gold. So the same thing applies to us. Fundamentally, what we are is this presence awareness. It has many different forms and shapes and colors. But in essence, we are that one. We are not a separate self, even though we believe that we are. So, all appearances are nothing but that one undeniable being awareness. All that appears, including the seeker himself, is only that. You are that. Now, can that be realized? Can we realize that? And it's so interesting because everything points back to that. Everything we do, everything we say points back to that fundamental awareness, that fundamental sense of being.
I think I've had Bill. Maybe Bill has some experience with this too, as dating as a new thing this year. When you're in love with somebody, you sense the distance between yourself and the other person sort of collapses. You know, there's not this separate thing that going on. It's one single solid entity, sort of say.
Right.
And when you're with that person, it's very strong. When you're away from it, it's not so strong. But I think to me that's a perfect example of what you're talking about. You know, when you're in love with somebody, or probably when you see a beautiful piece of art, you start thinking, "Wow, that is," like I saw Van Gogh's bedroom this last year, and it was sort of, you know, just kind of sort of merge into the picture, so to speak. You know, you kind of lose your distance. So I think these kind of experiences kind of
Yes.
underscore.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, in a great love or in nature, the me tends to disappear. The me dissolves at those moments. When you're sharing a great love, when there is love, there's no me present. It's like seeing the divine in one another.
Well, in all things of beauty, right?
Yeah.
Beauty itself. I don't mean beauty of necessarily a physical beauty, although it could be physical beauty too, but just beauty and innocence. You know, the innocence of a puppy, the innocence of a baby, the innocence of goodness.
Goodness.
Just goodness.
Well, I go back to you know, that video camera. You know, am I the camera that's recording, that's watching, that's aware, with no judgment, just the tape's turned on, or it's not a tape anymore, it's digital. But you're just aware of what's happening. The camera is just aware. Or am I the tape that's being recorded that has all the opinions and the story and it's two different states. You know, the camera is non-judgmental, non-personal, aware of everything, but it's a video camera. It's just recording whatever, and then there's the stream of what is being recorded. which
Yes.
is
Yes.
personal me. That's the me.
Yes.
That's the, I am being recorded. This is good. This is bad. I like this. I don't like that. This, I want to cut that, edit this out. But the camera is just completely disconnected to what's being recorded. It's just aware.
Correct. Well, that's what.
I kind of agree with you in a sense that you know there are these situations when you're caught in, I'll use awe. You're caught in awe.
Mm,
You're, and I don't know how long it lasts. It might last a millisecond. It might last a couple of minutes or whatever. It doesn't last hours, but I think there's a moment there when when there is no thought, and you recognize that when the thinking machine comes in now to try to explain it. And I think that is when you're not the thinking part of it, that's the awareness that's present.
Mm-hmm.
And it's present because you, the I, is not.
You're not
there,
interpreting.
not in that picture. And I mean, I think we've all had those experiences. You know, it can happen sometimes. You look at a beautiful painting or a beautiful woman or a beautiful night, or there's something that just catches you, and the brain doesn't work and process it to the eye. The sensor doesn't come in and try to define it. The minute it does, you're back into the eye syndrome.
Yeah.
And I've experienced that. So with the help of the understanding of these meetings and the readings and so on and so forth, you get a better understanding of what's happening, and you can relate it to a concept like awareness.
okay. So, yes, Ugo, I think what's important here, awareness is not a concept. The me is a concept.
All right.
Awareness is not a concept. Awareness is what is, right? So whether there's something to be aware of or nothing to be aware of, awareness is. And you are that. And that's the beauty of all this. And that's what non-duality is about. Non-duality is a pointer to your true self-knowledge, what you really are, your true nature. And your true nature is not two, it's one. It's one without a second. There is no second, it's just awareness. And yes, it is like a camera in a sense that it has no judgment. It's open, it's free, and it has no judgment. It just reflects what is. We have misidentified what we fundamentally are. So we fundamentally are free, truly free, and peaceful, and innocent, and beautiful. That's what we fundamentally are. However, when the identification comes up with this me, this I concept, we're lost. And that's why it's so important to give attention when this me arises, as it arises, right? As the fear arises, as the anger arises, as it arises, to shine a spotlight of attention. And like Jean Klein says, attention without tension. Attention without tension. Just pure attention. Pure awareness. Have that shine on what's arising as this me arises. Whatever appears.
I have a question.
Yes, Rita.
Yes. So when somebody dies suddenly and you discover a body
Yes.
and you are in a state of shock
Mhm.
and disbelief
Mhm.
and unbelievable grieving.
Yes.
What is that, real or not real? Or are you supposed to say, oh, I'm aware of what I'm feeling?
No.
How does that work?
No. When life presents us with situations that are so difficult, we have to be fully present at that situation. And we have to allow whatever appears inside of us to appear. Grief is one of the most difficult, painful experiences. And we have to be fully present with it as much as we can. We don't censor it, we don't judge it, we certainly don't say, I shouldn't be feeling this. We've got to be fully present with the what is of that extremely painful experience. Stay with it. Just stay with it as best as you can. What happens, unfortunately, is that the mind does come in and doesn't allow you to stay just with the grief. It starts the thinking process. Why did this happen to me? This person that I've lost, now a life is lost. What's going to become of me? What is going to be now my, it starts to be about me. And that's suffering. That's true suffering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we have to have an awareness that that's what's going on and stay with the non-thinking, if at all possible,
Mm-hmm.
and just with the reality of that grief and that loss.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that feeling is, to stay with it, not run away from it, not deny it, and certainly not to make it about me.
You know, I heard the other day a story about a couple that were married for many, many years, and he died suddenly. And this was in a time when they had spiritual healers who could bring you back to life if they got there within a certain amount of time. So they quickly called a spiritual healer to come. And just as he was about to lay hands on her husband and bring him back to life, rather than stay with her sadness, she couldn't help herself. She said, wait, when you bring him back, can you make him a little less bossy and controlling?
True story.
True story.
Hey,
Thank you, Evelyn. I just want to share that last week sometime
Yes.
I was sitting and looking at something, and I had the experience after it was over that I was literally in the conscious world because I had no thought, nothing. I just was. And it was kind of amazing. And when it occurred to me that I just was, then the mind went in. But it was really a beautiful experience to have that experience.
Yes.
And I'm trying to, I don't know how it's going to happen again, but it just happened. I just wanted to share it.
Yes. So there was a sense of being,
Exactly.
pure being.
Exactly. Just breathing, just nothing.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I said last week or the week before that I've been reminded every day of my basic intrinsic awareness when I go out to the pool and I press the button on my pool robot. Because when I go out there, he's sitting on the bottom of the pool, just a hunk of plastic, metal, and rubber, inert. I press the button and life pulses through him. He becomes alive and he starts going on his way, doing his nice cleaning, washing, climbing up the walls of the side of the pool. Awareness, suddenly, I give him the gift of awareness by pressing that button. Now imagine if I took, you know, when you go fishing, they have these sinkers that you can put on your line to make it sink to the bottom. Imagine if I took 3 or 4 sinkers and I labeled one of them fear and I tied it to his body. And then I labeled another one desire. And then I labeled another one his self-image of himself, how he sees himself. Now, suddenly, he's going along doing his business, but he's dragging all this weight behind him. And he slows down. He can barely make it around the pool. And suddenly, he gets exhausted and he stops.
Wow.
So that's it. Every day I get reminded that, you know, awareness is pulsating through me. A life force animates this chunk of inertness. And what's dragging me down? What gets in the way of my full functioning, my full enjoyment, my full clarity and compassion?
Thank you. You both look beautiful, by the way. Love from California.
Oh, Rita.
Okay, I'm going to unmute myself.
Okay.
So Abby and Paul, when you notice that the me is showing up again, which for me is almost all the time, what do you do to bring yourself back to awareness? I mean, they say that even the presence of the me isn't itself okay because everything's occurring in awareness, even the ego is occurring in awareness.
Right, sure.
But at any rate, are there any tips to sort of stay focused? I know that we're getting into the whole thing of who is staying focused, I know, but how does one keep shining the spotlight on awareness?
Turn off the TV.
Well, Bill, you just said you become aware of the me arising, right?
Yes.
What happens at that moment when there's an awareness of the me arising?
It stops arising.
Of course, you're doing it. That's all there is to do. You are doing it.
So the seeing is the doing again.
Yes, the seeing is the doing. It stops. It may come up again in a different form. But then if the seeing is the doing, it stops.
You know, I just have to keep being reminded of this.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't stick. I keep forgetting it.
Ah, yeah, well,
we keep forgetting to look, right? You keep forgetting to notice.
Yes, exactly.
yeah. But the minute you see the me arising, awareness sees the me arising, you're out of the me because otherwise you wouldn't have seen it. So it's awareness that's seeing, right? And that expands. The more that happens, the more there's a seeing of that, a witnessing of that. The times of the me arising becomes less, and awareness becomes, as Rita said, a state of being. It's not really a state, it's just is. Then it's just being.
Didn't Nisargadatta, you know, when he was right before he became enlightened, he would say to himself, I am.
Yes.
Inhale, I, exhale, am. And he did that over a course of years, and suddenly, and then it stuck. But
Yeah.
it required this sort of process in his case.
Well, what he said in his book, I Am That, he said every spare moment, because he was busy, he was working, but every spare moment he would sit quietly with just the sense and hold on to I am. That's all he did, he said. But he did it consistently. And then he said after 3 years, there was an awakening to his true nature.
So, you know, I guess it's also another way to put it. It's like being aware when you're not right, when you don't feel happy, when you don't feel at ease, when you don't feel, you know, like you're okay and peacefully happy. What is then on my mind?
Right.
Right? Where have my thoughts gone?
Yes.
Right? Where have my thoughts gone?
Well, yes. So, or another way is saying, where am I living? At those moments, where am I living? Am I living in the past? Am I projecting and living in the future? Because that's what's causing the disruption.
I remember Eckhart Tolle once saying, I'll tell you the story of any movie, book, or anything that you can think of. I'm going to tell you the story right now without having read it. Something goes wrong. Right? And it's the same with us, right? We can wake up in the morning, assuming we haven't had a nightmare and I'm not carrying anything over from my sleep. You wake up with a fresh slate, a clean pile of awareness, and then something goes wrong.
Right.
Some frustration, some self-doubt, some envy, some jealousy, some annoyance that I chew on rather than let go.
Yep.
Yes, because at that moment, I've switched the identity to the separate self. So I've left my true nature, in a sense. You can never leave it because it's always there. But the identification switched from that fresh awareness upon awakening, that first few moments of awakening, before there's even an identification of a body, let alone a mind. There's just pure being awareness. It switches very quickly to the separate self. And as soon as there's a switch to the separate self, what am I going to do today? How am I going to pay the bills? What about whatever it is? And then you're off. And you're locked into that.
So, Evie and Paul, why does the separate self tend to follow the negative paths?
Oh, it all
the hurtful paths, instead of saying, oh yeah, I have this problem, but listen to the birds singing, isn't that beautiful? Or aren't I having a wonderful breakfast? Instead, our minds tend to follow the problems and solving the problems and the negative, this happened to me. What's up with that?
okay. So look, so first of all, the separate self also goes into positive. That's how it's so tricky, because it also says, oh, I'm so wonderful. Mm-hmm. Oh, it says, I can do this better than she can do this. It becomes, competitive grandizement. It grandizes itself. But the separate self always has to have something to feed it. Mm. So it feeds on problems. It feeds on worries, because that's what keeps it going. And you can see that for yourself. Mm-hmm. Look how we get so involved in a problem, a fear, a worry, rather than stepping back and seeing it's an appearance.
So yeah, and so to add on to that, the me is always interested in three things: self-interest, self-protection, and self-expansion.
Right.
So imagine I was a robot, and in the morning, when Evelyn gets up, she can either turn my switch to self-identify, or she can turn my switch to pure being. So let's say she turns my switch to self-identify. Now my operating program is self-interest, self-protection, and self-expansion, right? A neighbor knocks on my door and says, "Hi, your tree is hanging over my property line. Would you mind if I cut it? Cut it because it might fall on my car," or whatever. Well, my interest in self-protection is going to say, "Hell no, you ain't coming over and cutting down my tree." Last time when I wanted to cut down your, whatever, I would have a personal reaction coming out of self-interest, self-protection, or self-expansion. Anything that happens is going to get filtered through that program. And that means I'm going to have self-interested, small, petty, me-centered responses. They're not going to be generous. They're not going to be compassionate. They're going to be all gauged on what's good for me. If in the morning Evelyn turns my switch to pure being, right, the same activities could happen. A neighbor could knock on my door. I could go out to my car and find out somebody hid it in the middle of the night. I could find out my computer was hacked and I lost thousands of dollars. But the reaction to those things would be more fact-oriented and less personal.
Yes.
That's a way to kind of just juxtapose it.
Well,
Hi,
Paul,
guys.
I've generally been very happy when one of my neighbors has offered to cut down parts of my trees, but I might have a different orientation on that.
Go for it.
But I actually had about this question, and I wanted to think about this just to give you an example of something that just happened today, so it's top of mind. Barb and Terry's mom is in assisted living. The home is needing to be, everything needed to be moved out and the home sold. And so we had one of the family heirlooms was going to one of the grandchildren. And it's a very big dresser. And it turned out the movers we had hired for the specific purpose of just getting the dresser out had spent an hour and a half, made 3 different attempts at getting it down a flight of stairs, and it turned out they could not do it. So the dresser, which is like an 1840 antique, had to go back, and it's not going to get moved. So I felt, you know, I mean, I was trying to help with the effort, and I felt bad that this had happened. Okay, so this is a feeling by me about me, but I wouldn't put it in any of the 3 categories that are sort of. I think maybe it's a positive thing that you could feel bad about something that's disappointing to somebody else or doesn't turn out well for somebody else, and so is that another category, because it's still about me? I mean, it's still about my feelings, right? So that's what I was just asked about.
All right. You were feeling it, but it was about whoever this other person is. You were feeling badly for this other person being disappointed.
That is correct.
That's right.
That's correct.
So
that's
it
exactly.
really, the feeling was through you, but it was about this other person. It was like empathetic to another person.
That's a good term. Empathy. Yes, it's empathy.
Right.
Yes.
So
yes.
that's different. That's not the ego me. Empathy.
Okay.
Empathy is a part of compassion.
All right. But it's still, I guess, it's something I'm experiencing. But okay, but it is something that the me can experience that is not an id phenomenon. I mean, whatever the right word is.
Yeah, yeah. Steve,
Okay.
yeah. So, so the way we would describe it would be that empathy is a higher self function, so to speak. Empathy, you're not going to get much empathy from your me-centered ego. Empathy comes closer as a manifestation of your higher self. So
Okay.
right? So when I'm empathetic, when I'm caring, when I'm generous, when I'm unself-interested, those are higher self functions, so to speak. My best self shows up.
Okay, that's reassuring. I just wanted to make sure that that was part of the overall framework, I guess.
Right.
Of this.
But with that, you still have that personal feeling of feeling like you failed or you should have done something, and that's the ego, and that's what you need to pull the plug on, because
that's right. If there's a feeling I failed, or what a good person I am, that I'm feeling badly for this other person, that's an ego. That's the me we're talking about.
I did feel a little bit of the personal failure part because I was a participant in the effort, but I don't think I don't think the latter part was part about it, that I felt good about the fact that I was feeling bad. You know, probably not. But I don't know. It's hard to know, you know.
Okay.
Hard to know.
But
hi guys, it's Chip. Hello.
Yes, Chip. Yes. Hi.
I think you guys have talked about a lot of really wonderful things here tonight. I think the other part of this is that basically this idea there is no separate self. So there's only the self with a capital S, right? So this notion of ego is an illusion.
Yes.
Right? And that's an illusion that we come to live under. It's actually us as actors in the world. You know, the world is but a stage, right? So we take on these parts and we think that's who we are. But in fact, that's not who we are. We are the self.
Right.
So when we are the self, we'll take on the role of being the person with the tree, the person with the car, the pool mechanism, et cetera, et cetera. So there is only the self.
Yes.
So what happens is we come in and we limit that experience of the self, which is not bound to a particular body, to a particular mind. It's everything. Like Paul was talking about his pool robot. And you push the button and then it activates it, right? So that's what's happened. We've been activated by this life force, which is the same life force for all of us.
Right.
Yes.
And that's all we are.
Right.
This egoic self is actually a part that we're taking on, like any actor. We're taking on this role, but it's an illusion. And it's as if an actor goes to play the part on Broadway or whatever, and then they're walking home and they think they're still playing that role.
Right.
That's exactly what's happening with us.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it's not, so when Bob was asked, or excuse me, Bill was asking before, you know, how do I know it's this or that? There is only the self. If you're looking at your experience of awareness and saying, well, how do I know if it's, you know, the egoic self? There is only the self. And the only thing that's precluding that self from recognizing itself is this notion of a separate being, of a separate presence, of a separateness. So in other words, it's a limit that we're placing on our experience of the world, and we can drop that at any time. And that also gets back to Rita's thing about grief, about having that experience of grief.
Yes.
There's grief now because you feel or possibly there was this experiencing of separation. But that's, I think that's our real reason for a spiritual life. There is only life. So spiritual life is kind of saying life. So I think when we really get into this, what we're going to find is all this sadness we're experiencing with feelings of loss, grief, all these kinds of things. We'll find out that in fact what we thought was happening isn't in fact happening, that we're missing part of the picture. But anyway, so that was just
Chip?
Yeah.
Did you hear the reading earlier from Wheeler?
No, unfortunately I got here a little bit late. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, the reading that we did addresses exactly what you were just saying, how the self that usually we're operating from is pure illusion and myth.
Yes, yes. However, there's been an identification with it. So in other words, there's been, if you can say, our real self and our false self. I mean, let's just use those terms for now. There's been an identification with a false self that we're calling the me, the ego. The essence of it all is only awareness. There's nothing but awareness. But we've taken the illusion of separateness from awareness, and in this waking state, we've made it a reality. And that's the reality that we're living from. And awakening is just that, awakening to the truth. The truth being there's only presence awareness. There's nothing else. And yes, Chip, you're right. This egoic me is an illusion because it does not exist independent of thought. The basis of it is thought, which is based on memory, which is a mechanical process in the brain. And it's taken as reality. And it lives in time. It lives in the past or it lives in the future. Our true self, our real nature is timeless. And that's why there is an awareness. There is an awareness of time through the eyes of the timeless. That's what awareness is. It shines a spotlight on time, on the me, on the illusion. So it's about misidentification fundamentally. And, right? And the question is, can we disidentify once the identification is realized?
Right, and one of the approaches you can use is to expand the scope of your part, the part that you think you've been written. You know, in other words, as the actor, you expand the scope of the actor. So you're not just Hamlet. You know, you're Shakespeare. You know, you're beyond. And so that the only limit that is happening on a moment-to-moment basis is that one that we're believing is there. But as we start to explore that, we find that it doesn't really exist.
Correct. That's right. That's right. So.
Well, we've come to the end of another hour. I don't think we're going to be here next week.
Now, we're not going to have a meeting next week. We will be here in 2 weeks. And what we might explore in 2 weeks is relationship. I think that might be very interesting to explore, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll look at that in 2 weeks. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us.
Everybody have a good week.
Have a good 2 weeks. We'll see you then.
Buonasera a tutti.
Thank you. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
See you all in 2 weeks.